Hello, Highrock. My name is Ethan, and I'm the ministry coordinator at Highrock North Shore. I wish we were all here in the sanctuary together, but on the plus side, worshiping from home means you get to worship in your pajamas. So, pros and cons. Have you ever been to the dentist and had your mouth numbed up? I've had plenty of dental work done, so I'm all too familiar with that numbing shot. All of my experiences at the dentist have gone well. I've never had anything go wrong while there. But there was one day that my trip to the dentist was a little more eventful than I had wanted. It was about 10 years ago. One day I get a phone call from my old high school orchestra teacher. He told me that our city's youth symphony, which he conducted, had a concert coming up in a few months and asked if I would be willing to read some poetry in between the songs throughout the concert. I mean, it was 5 months away. I certainly hadn't planned anything that far ahead, so I said, sure, I'd be happy to. And then I promptly forgot about it. So fast forward a few months. One Saturday, I went in for a dentist's appointment. I was getting a root canal, which is a pretty hefty operation, so my dentist numbed my mouth up real good. And after the procedure, as I was driving home, I got a text from my orchestra teacher saying, "Hey Ethan, since the concert starts at 7, try to get here around 6 o'clock tonight so we have enough time for sound checks. See you in a bit." I had completely forgotten about that concert, and I had accidentally scheduled my root canal on the very same day. A few hours from then, I was supposed to be reading poetry in front of hundreds of people, and my entire mouth was completely numb. I started to panic. I couldn't feel my mouth at all. I couldn't drink anything because I couldn't press my bottom lip against the glass enough. I couldn't eat anything because my tongue was completely numb. And worst of all, I couldn't talk. I mean, I can make sounds, sure, but my bottom lip and my tongue were so numb that I couldn't form the sounds for letters like M or F or B, and I was expected to read poetry like that. Right, for the next few hours, all I did was vocal warm-ups and facial exercises. I did them as much as I could, just trying to get some feeling back in my face. I mean, I looked like I was warming up for a Broadway show. And those few hours leading up to the concert were terrifying. All I could think about were the different ways I might ruin this concert, all because of a numb mouth. I was thinking about all the parents there with video cameras recording their kids' concert only to have me ruin it. About how disappointed my old orchestra teacher was going to be. About what I would do if I bit my tongue and started bleeding while I was up there because it was numb and I couldn't feel it. And honestly, I was thinking about how foolish I was about to look in front of all those people. And I considered calling my orchestra teacher and telling him I couldn't do it, but the concert was only a few hours away. There was no way he'd find a replacement in time. But thankfully, by the time I showed up for sound checks, my mouth was almost entirely back to normal. I still had a little trouble pronouncing my F's, but I don't think anyone noticed. I read the poetry, people didn't boo me off stage. The concert went on without a hiccup, and I breathed a huge sigh of relief. And all of that because of a numb mouth. All of that, all the panic, all the times I accidentally bit my tongue warming up, all of the worrying about ruining an entire night for these kids just because of a numb mouth. How often do we find that one tiny little thing can affect so much of our life? I mean, sometimes we don't even think about it, really. It's just a simple dentist's appointment until that one thing starts to affect all the other parts of our lives as well. This morning, we're continuing our sermon series on the greatest commandment of all time. What Jesus said was the most important thing we're invited to do. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We've heard from Pastors Bryn, Matt, and Angie about loving the Lord with our heart, with our soul, with our mind, and today we're going to consider what it means to love the Lord our God with all of our strength. When Pastor Bryn asked me to preach on loving the Lord with our strength, with all of our physical selves, she said, "Hey, you were a PE major in college," which I was, "and your wife is a physician assistant that works in weight and wellness. This is perfect." I guess she chose to ignore the fact that I'm also the guy who loves Taco Bell so much that he has an actual ordering kiosk from their drive-thru in his living room as a piece of home decor. But what does it really mean to love the Lord with all of our strength? During this series, we've explored what it looks like to love the Lord with our hearts and our souls and our minds, but how do we do that with our strength? When Jesus put strength right up there with heart, soul, and mind, he obviously thought it was just as important as the others, but did he just mean we need to eat healthy foods and exercise? Is this verse just telling me to put down the Taco Bell and go for a run? I don't think that's quite what Jesus meant. And if we look to the Bible for tips and tricks for the perfect leg day exercise and a new protein shake recipe, we're going to be disappointed. And honestly, I doubt anyone wants to hear me talk for 30 minutes about how Jesus says you need to go to the gym and cut processed sugar out of your diet. Yet, even still, each of us does have a body. And the Bible does talk about our bodies quite a bit. In the beginning, when God created life, he breathed life into the dust and created humankind. He created us in his own image. When God first created humans, he gave us not only souls, but bodies as well. That was always part of our design. The psalmist tells us that God designed each and every one of us individually. He gave each of us a body just as he gave each of us a heart, a soul, and a mind. And just as our hearts and souls and minds are unique, so are our bodies. And these bodies, Paul says, are temples in which the Holy Spirit, the very presence of God, dwells. Our bodies are important. Jesus Christ, the Messiah, God himself, came to earth physically, intangibly. God himself had a physical body too. And it was through his body that God walked among us, loved us, taught us, and died for us. And just as Jesus takes care of us, we should take care of our bodies. We should feed them and care for them. We should stay away from overeating and drinking too much alcohol because it negatively affects our bodies and our minds and our energy. How we treat our bodies is important. Man, that all sounds great, doesn't it? That's motivational. Let's just end the sermon here. Go in peace. Take care of your bodies. Amen. I'll be honest. When I was writing this sermon, and specifically when I got to this part right here, I was sitting at my desk and I realized I hadn't left my home in 3 days. Not even for a walk, for a quick trip to the grocery store, nothing. When I've been doing schoolwork and church work and stuff, it's not like I'd just been sitting there staring at the wall for 3 days, but my total step count for those 3 days all put together, it wasn't even half of what's recommended for a single day. I felt lethargic. I felt worn out. I didn't really feel motivated to do anything at all. At one point during the day, my wife Kayla asked me if everything was okay because it seemed like something was bothering me. Nothing at all was bothering me. I just felt bleh. And the reality is that even though we all sometimes long for a day where we just sit around the house and do nothing, being quarantined for 11 months is exhausting. It's hard to have energy. It's hard to stay active and healthy. So much of our lives are virtual right now. For many of us, work or school are totally or partially virtual. Church and small groups are virtual. We can even order groceries online and have them delivered right to our front door. Because of the quarantine, nearly every aspect of our lives now takes place from the comfort of our homes. And it's made taking care of our bodies so much harder. It's become easier to be more sedentary. It's become easier to eat too much food. It's become easier to drink more alcohol when you're quarantined to your home for 11 months. And the statistics show it. A study by Blue Cross Blue Shield found that since the beginning of COVID-19, alcohol consumption in America has risen by 23%. And when you take into account the fact that before the pandemic, America consumed around 8 billion gallons of alcohol a year, that 23% is a staggering increase. Another study found that 41% of adults in America have been eating more during meals and have been snacking more throughout the day since the pandemic began. And since so many of us are working or learning from home, the average American has been sitting between 4 to 6 more hours a day. Not 4 to 6 hours a day. 4 to 6 more hours a day than usual. It's always hard to take care of our bodies. But during COVID-19, it's been even harder. We're worried about job security. We're trying to figure out how to help our kids learn from home. We're worried about our health, about our family's health, about our friends' health. We're trying to maintain friendships and relationships, but we can't see our friends. We're relying on Zoom meetings and phone calls to personally connect with others. And if we do see people out while we quickly shop for groceries, we can't see their faces. We can't see them smile. We stay 6 feet away from everyone. And I know I've been guilty of saying to myself, when the pandemic starts to get under control, or when life starts to go back to normal, I'll start going back to the gym. I'll start being more conscious of what I eat. I'll start fill in the blank. It's hard to take care of our bodies when so much else is going on, when so much else is running through our minds, when so much else is weighing down our hearts and weighing down our souls. So why? Why does Jesus tell us it's so important that we love God with our strength? Why, when so much else is going on in the world, when so much else is going on in our lives, why does it matter? Love the Lord with all your strength. You know, when Jesus told us to love the Lord with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, he was actually quoting a very well-known part of Hebrew Scripture, Deuteronomy 6:4. This passage is called the Shema, and it's called that because the Hebrew word Shema is the first word of the passage, and it means to listen or to hear. And the passage goes like this: Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Loving God with all of their heart and soul and strength was so important that God told the Israelites to talk about it all the time. When you wake up and when you go to bed, talk about it. When you're at home or when you're traveling, talk about it. Remind your children, write it all over your house. Do not forget it. And even now, thousands of years later, this commandment stands out in many Jewish communities. My wife, Kayla, and I have a good friend who's Jewish. And one time when we were FaceTiming her, she walked the camera all around her house and showed us all the places that she had the Shema displayed. It was written in tiny rolled up pieces of paper and attached to her door frames. It was on necklaces and jewelry. It was everywhere. So when Pastor Bryn asked me to preach today, I went to Deuteronomy 6:4 to take a look at the Shema, since that's what Jesus is quoting in our passage. And that's when I noticed something interesting. In the original Hebrew, which is the language this passage was written in, the word used in the Shema for strength is ma'od. Now, ma'od isn't actually a noun like the words used for heart and soul before it. It's an adjective, and it means very or exceedingly. I mean, it's the Hebrew equivalent of saying wicked in Massachusetts. You know, it's wicked cold outside. It's ma'od cold outside. Just picture Ben Affleck saying it, and you got it. Ma'od is a word that is used to intensify whatever is being talked about. And we see this word ma'od used hundreds of times all over the Old Testament. In Genesis chapter 1, when God looked upon the finished product of all he had created, he saw that it was ma'od good, or very good. In the story of Noah, the floodwaters were rising and becoming ma'od powerful, or exceedingly powerful. In the story of Cain and Abel, Cain wasn't just angry at his brother Abel, he was ma'od angry. When Saul became the first king of Israel, he was ma'od happy. You get the picture. So if we were to translate that sentence very woodenly, it would read, love the Lord with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your very, or with all of your muchness. See, ma'od doesn't just mean physical strength. There's a perfectly good Hebrew word for physical strength that could have been used here, but instead, it's me'od. It's the word that intensifies whatever's being talked about. It's your very, it's your muchness, your everything. It doesn't just mean loving God with your body or your physical strength, but loving God with all of your ability, all of your capacity, all of yourself. Because while we can certainly isolate our hearts and our souls and our minds and our bodies and talk about how each of them are individually important, how each aspect of ourselves needs individual attention and care, they also all go together. Each one can affect the others. When one part of us is hurting, it starts to touch the other areas of our lives too, like how a simple trip to the dentist one morning nearly ruined a youth symphony's concert. Our physical selves are not isolated from our hearts, our souls, and our minds. They all go together. Each one can affect the others. In that study about increased alcohol consumption that I mentioned earlier, over half of the people who responded saying that they had increased their drinking said that the increase was because they were trying to cope with the stress of life during a pandemic. And a third of them said it was because they were trying to cope with anxiety and depression during the pandemic. And the people who admitted they were eating and snacking more listed some of those same reasons: stress, anxiety, depression. Over half of all domestic violence cases involve alcohol. And just as alcohol consumption has increased during the pandemic, so have domestic violence rates. Stress, depression, anger, alcohol abuse, fear, violence. It's so easy for one to suddenly affect the other. Suddenly it's not just a heart issue or a mind issue or a physical issue. It's all of them. Our sedentary lifestyles are bad for our health. We've all heard that 1,000 times. It's bad for our hearts, it's bad for our backs, it's bad for our muscles, all of that. It's good for our physical heart health to get up and get active. We've heard it 100 times. But studies also show that sedentary lifestyles are bad for our mental and emotional health. Our brains depend on good blood flow, and it's hard to get that blood flow consistently without some form of physical activity. And without it, we begin to feel lethargic and worn out. We begin to lose motivation and mental discipline. We don't operate at our peak mental performance. Without much physical activity, we often begin to feel the weight of stress and anxiety more. Exhaustion, mental fatigue, physical fatigue, depression, no motivation. Suddenly, it's not just a heart issue or a mind issue or a physical issue. It's all of them. When one part of us is hurting, it starts to touch the other areas of our lives too. And it's hard to love the Lord with all of our strength, with all of our with all of our muchness, when one area of our life begins to affect the other areas as well. Now, before we move on, I want to pause for a moment and say very clearly that if you are struggling with chronic depression or anxiety, if you are worried about how much you're drinking or eating, or any medications you're taking, or if your physical boundaries are not being respected by someone in your life, you are not alone. These are true struggles that many in our community face, and sometimes just choosing to take better care of our physical selves isn't enough. We need the support of professionals or a loving community that can care for us and remind us that we are loved and that we are heard and that our bodies are worth preserving and protecting. But just as Pastor Angie shared last week, so many of us who are worried about some aspect of our lives often struggle in silence because our society has labeled or stigmatized certain issues or challenges in life. And the church, unfortunately, has often been a part of this. So let me say very clearly, everyone struggles with something. Sometimes many things all at the same time, even those of us who are following Jesus. So if you're struggling, or if you're worried about your physical body in any way or any part of yourself, please know that our pastoral teams are here to support you and to love you and to help you find some next steps towards healing and towards wholeness. Love the Lord with all of your strength. When we are physically healthy, it helps us to be totally healthy. Our physical health affects our emotional health, our spiritual health, and our mental health in the same way that our emotional, spiritual, and mental health affect our physical health. They are all interconnected. They all go together. Loving the Lord with all of our strength is loving the Lord with all of our ma'od, with all of our muchness, with all of our everything. And when we love God with all that we are, when we strive towards living a healthy emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical life, that is worship to God. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. And it's this true and proper worship, this total health, emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical health, that enables us to love and serve as part of Christ's body. It allows us to use our hearts and our souls and our minds and our bodies to be the hands and feet of Christ, to go where He calls us and to serve how He leads us and to love those around us. Because there is a purpose to our physical health beyond just holistic well-being. It allows us to be the light of Christ to those around us. Because God Himself came to earth in the flesh with a body, and He met the tangible physical needs of those around Him. He healed the sick, He fed the hungry, He gave legs to the crippled. Jesus Christ is the mercy of God in the flesh, and ultimately, that body was nailed to a cross, crucified and killed and buried. And then on the third day, He rose again. And He went to His disciples, and the first thing He did was show them His body, show them His scars. And He showed them what His body did for them. So what would it look like if we did that? How do we take those steps towards physical health that will help us love God with all of our muchness, especially during COVID-19, when the surest way to stay safe from COVID is to stay at home? Trying to be physically healthier doesn't mean we have to suddenly start going to the gym for a couple of hours every day. It doesn't mean we can't eat the foods that we like. It doesn't mean everyone needs to completely cut alcohol out of our diet. Some of you may want to do that, and if so, go for it. But for many of us, striving towards physical health will be in the small things. For me, going on walks has been wonderful. When I'm at home working at my desk all day, I'll plan out a few different times throughout the day where I can go for a quick walk. Sometimes it's just a quick 5-minute walk to the end of the block and back, and sometimes it's a little bit longer. But breaking up a long day full of meetings and classes and work with some walking feels amazing. It gets your heart rate up. You feel the fresh air on your face. You get a change of scenery. Your eyes get a rest from staring at a screen all day, and it's only 5 minutes. Instead of pulling out your phone and scrolling social media for 5 minutes, try going for a walk. Maybe it looks like being more conscious of how many drinks you have throughout the week. Instead of having a drink whenever I feel like it, this week I'll limit myself to X amount of drinks. Try tapering it down a bit, or limiting when you're drinking to a certain time, like while you're eating dinner. Or maybe it looks like being honest with a friend, telling them that you're worried about the things you're putting in your body and letting them help you. Maybe it looks like keeping less snacky foods in the house. Every year, my wife Kayla and I give up processed sugar for the month of January. And let me tell you, it helps get us back on track after all the heavy and sugary holiday foods that we eat in November and December, which is a lot. So maybe try picking a particular kind of food or drink that you feel you might have too much of, like fast food or chips or sodas, or for me, candy, and giving it up for a while. Pick a day out of the week or a couple of days and don't eat it or drink it. You might be surprised at how easy it is to go from 1 day to 2 days, then 3 days, then to a whole week without it. Maybe it looks like asking God how you can be the hands and feet of Christ right now. Writing a note to a friend, or making dinner and dropping it off at someone's house. Asking God to show you how you can use your body to be Christ's body to others. Love the Lord with all of your strength. The goal here isn't to become a bodybuilder or a professional nutritionist. It's simply to help us connect to our whole self, to our heart, our soul, our mind, and our strength, and to love the Lord with all of our ma'od, all of our all of our muchness, all of our everything. And as we do, may our everything be a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. Amen? Amen. As we close, I'm excited for us to continue our segment called Practical Tips from a Highrock Expert. And today we have the pleasure of hearing from Hillary Linehan. Hillary is a nurse practitioner at Mass General Brigham Urgent Care, and I'm excited to welcome her as she shares a few ideas on how we can better take care of our physical selves as we love the Lord our God, and to share an update about Highrock Health.
Hi, I'm Hillary, and I'm going to give you some practical healthcare tips. This past year, we've seen a lot of changes to the healthcare system due to the pandemic. When the pandemic first started, primary care doctors stopped seeing patients in their offices. This was to protect the patients and also from a shortage of PPE. Now, a year later, most primary care offices are now open and seeing patients on a regular basis. It's really important that you make sure that you keep up with your annual follow ups with your primary care and specialists. Maybe this past year, a lot of your medical appointments got canceled or you missed them because of COVID. Being proactive about your health is really important in preventing chronic diseases such as diabetes and high blood pressure. So maybe your cardiologist appointment or test got canceled. Maybe you're late on getting your yearly mammogram. If you're diabetic, maybe you haven't talked to your endocrinologist in months. I would encourage you this week to think about what medical appointments you need to make or reschedule. What primary care offices do you need to call? What medical tests do you need to get on the calendar? Take action now for these appointments, and this will likely decrease your likelihood on it negatively impacting your health later. Maybe you don't have a primary care doctor. If you're younger and don't have a lot of medical problems, you may think a primary care doctor is something you do not need, but I would encourage you to get one. One reason is that you never know what could happen to your health. If you're hospitalized due to an emergency surgery or hospitalized due to COVID, you'll need somebody to follow up with you once you're discharged from the hospital. A lot of COVID 19 follow ups are being done through phone calls after patients are being discharged from the hospital. Your primary care is a vital part of your health and is responsible for detecting disease early and ordering any lab or medical tests you might need. You may be anxious about going to a medical facility for your appointments. Outpatient facilities have done a really good job on creating COVID 19 protocol to help prevent you from getting COVID. All primary care offices are routinely screening for COVID, so it creates a safe environment for patients to come to the office. And sometimes they have special hours for COVID patients only to come. Many specialists and primary care doctors are also using telemedicine. This is where you would speak with your healthcare provider on a video chat or just over the phone. These types of visits are now being covered by health insurance. While there are limitations to these types of visits, most chronic conditions like high blood pressure and diabetes can be effectively managed through telemedicine. If your healthcare provider thinks you need to be seen in person, they will let you know where to go to do that, like an urgent care, a respiratory treatment center if you have COVID 19, or possibly the emergency room. I would encourage you to make sure to contact your doctor with any medical concern you have. Even if it's after your doctor's office has closed, most doctor's offices have a doctor on call or a nurse on call that you can speak to. If you have an urgent medical question and it's not an emergency, then please make sure to reach out for your doctor for advice. You're never going to be bothering your healthcare provider by calling them. It's their job to be involved and up to date on how you're feeling. So make sure you keep them involved in your care on a regular basis. I'd also like to give you a update on Highrock Health. This past January, we had several events going on with the Highrock Health Ministry. The first ministry we did was a wellness clinic, which we hosted at Dane Street Church. We invited people to make an appointment online to come get their blood pressure or their blood sugar checked and also receive health education. We had a good group of High Rockers there who were nurses, physician assistants, and nurse practitioners. We were also able to invite a health enrollment specialist to come, and this person was able to answer any health insurance enrollment questions or help people start getting the enrollment process started if they did not have health insurance. The other event that we had this January was the COVID 19 care packages. So we were able to assemble care packages for families in need. We put in these care packages things you would need to protect yourself from COVID 19. So we did hand sanitizer, soap, masks, hand soap, and gave these out through a drive-through. So I really want to say thank you to everybody who came out and helped with the wellness clinic. Thank you guys so much, and also everybody who came and helped assemble the care packages and the drive-through. So we'll definitely be hosting more events with Highrock Health in the future. We're hoping to have more wellness clinics coming up this summer. So stay tuned, and if you're wanting to get involved, whether you're in healthcare or you're a non-medical provider, definitely feel free to contact me.